Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today on our newest feature, Learning Plans. I am Katie Mackay and
I'm Sam Mackay, and I'm the lead product designer at aXcelerate.
so today we thought we would, well, first of all, we're very excited to take you through the webinar. It has been a little while under wraps, and so we're very excited to launch our new feature, which is part of our Turbo offering. And this is currently in open beta. So really today we're trying to give you a bit of an overview as to what this feature would be able to do for you in your organization. It won't be necessarily a step-by-step or a training webinar, but we do have a whole suite of shot videos that have been all recorded, ready to go so that you can start going through and learning how this feature works after this webinar. A couple of key things just to note, as I said, this is a Turbo only feature, just for any of our standard clients that are watching this webinar as well. We do have the chat, so if you do have any questions as we're going, feel free to chuck them into the chat. And we've got a couple of our lovely aXcelerate customer success people in the chat as well, so they can go through and answer any questions that you might have, but we are also going to cover off questions at the end as well. I think apart from that, the only other thing to note is that this particular webinar on learning plans does utilize our online assessment feature and our online lessons feature, which we have actually done another webinar on previously. So if you are curious and you're wanting to watch that, by all means, you can go and watch that as well.
Yep.
So let's get started. What are we covering today?
Yep, so we'll be talking a little bit about why we develop learning plans. We'll take you through the learner experience, so what they'll see, how you'll set that all up in the authoring area, and then we'll end with some sneak peeks of what's coming soon and some questions and answers.
Things under the hood, that's right.
Yeah.
So I guess just to start, why do we create learning plans? And I guess, Sam, you've been such an integral part of all of the development behind learning plans, so I might let you kind of kick this off, but just as a super quick overview, I guess what we're trying to achieve here with this feature is a really simple step-by-step flow for a student to follow as they're progressing through a qualification or a short course.
Yeah, so like you said, we wanted to create a really clear path forward for learners, so there's not any guesswork as to what they should sort of be moving on with next. We also wanted a way to give learners a more accurate and detailed sense of progression. And so we've introduced features like prerequisites, which allow you to control what content a learner has access to at any one point in time. So learning plans has been built with short course providers and full qualification providers in mind, so it should sort of apply to both use cases quite nicely. And we've sort of taken an interesting approach with how it's presented, but it can be sort of like I guess a new online course and module based, or it can be sort of traditionally unit by unit based, which will probably make a bit more sense once we sort of take you through the learner experience side of things. So
yeah, and I was just going to say as well, with all of this, I guess this is, as I said a little earlier, we are currently in an open beta stage with this particular feature, and this is where feedback right now is so integral. So it's actually switched on for all of our clients that are with aXcelerate Turbo. So we welcome any and all feedback at this point, because even though we've tried to take into account all or as many different scenarios as we could, there's always different nuances and different ways that clients use aXcelerate, so any feedback would be really greatly appreciated. But without further ado, we might jump into our first little segment, which is our learner experience, which arguably is probably the most important part, really what a learner experiences as they're going through and undertaking a course. And yeah, I think we've probably already covered this ground, but the idea with learning plans is that regardless of whether your student is coming into a classroom and you're delivering your learning face-to-face, or it could be something where it's fully correspondence and you might be delivering everything online, it is suitable for both of those different scenarios. So I guess what we've got open in front of us, and I'll kind of run through a couple of things in here, and Sam, please feel free to fill in any gaps as I run through this. But this is our learner portal. And for any clients that may not be using our learner portal at the moment, this is a very customizable learner portal so that you can really go and make it look and feel how you're wanting it to look and feel for your learners, while also staying really modern and simplistic. And did I mention it's mobile responsive? So that's just something else to note as well. But you can see we're using a little bit of a green theme today to match our chef club training makeshift or make-believe RTO that Sam has so cleverly come up with. But yeah, I guess just to give you a little bit of an idea, learners when they log in, and obviously we're going to start going through the learning plan shortly, but if they are wanting to go and maybe use a night mode or a dark mode as opposed to the mode that we're looking at now, there's also kind of additional customizing that you can do of backgrounds, of logos, and there's a little preview of our lovely learning plan, which we'll jump into. And there is a lot of other sort of cool features that your students can actually be utilizing, which, yeah, we've got a whole lot of shop videos, which will hopefully help explain all of that as well. But otherwise, the page that we're on now is really this opening screen for our student when they do log in to their learner portal. So obviously we're using today an example of a Cert 4 in commercial cookery, quite a big qualification, but we really wanted to kind of give you a bit of an idea as to what this could look like through some of our examples today. So the very first screen that we start on is really this sort of collapsed version of our learning plan, where we can see, this first particular module, which we've named Welcome to Commercial Cookery. We've then got several modules after that, which, as you can probably tell, relate to a particular unit of competency. But what we're really trying to, in essence, show you is the fact that you could start at, unit 1, and it could be that we're starting at work effectively as a cook. But if you're wanting to, you can really nicely present a bit of an introduction to your students as well. So I'll let Sam maybe drill into that and kind of take you through a bit of an example as we've created in here, just to give you a bit of a sense as to what is possible.
Yeah, so we've created this Welcome to Commercial Cookery onboarding module, if you'd like. So here we've got a module overview, which is sort of free text or images, videos, that sort of thing. And then immediately after that, we've added a bit of content. So we've just included a graphic, which sort of covers the course outline. Immediately after that, we've added in these headings to sort of break up the content even further within this particular module. So we've got a couple of resources we've added from our resource library, and then some introductory lessons which the learner will actually have to do in order to gain access to the next module. So normally they'd have to do both of these, but we've actually set this course here to be optional. So what we'll do now is actually jump into core concepts and quickly run through that so we can see how that progression and flow actually looks for a learner. So when they jump into this lesson, which is a formative activity, so they won't be graded on this, they'll simply have to complete it. We've only got one sort of example question here. Is this a demonstration? It absolutely is. So once they complete whatever this lesson might be, it'll load up what their actual next lesson or next assessment they need to move on to will actually be as well. So this one right now is telling us that the next thing we've got to go and do is the commercial cookery about your course lesson. So what we're actually going to do now is go back to our learning plan so that we can see module 1 is now complete, and we've actually gained access to module 2. So in here we've got another overview, another bit of content describing what we're going to cover in this unit, and then some more headings to kind of break up what actual, I guess, learning and assessment learners will have to progress through in order to complete this module. So we've got another lesson, and that's actually a prerequisite of the assessments that we have as part of this particular module as well. So we've got a locked online quiz and a locked observation assessment that will be unlocked once the learner has completed this lesson here.
And that's a really important point, Sam, which I think I probably missed at the very beginning when I was showing the collapsed view of all of those modules. But you can see with our module 3, our module 4, our module 5, all of those require the completion of the previous module to then be able to be unlocked to start progressing through. So we're going to talk a lot about rules and prerequisites because that's kind of one of the key benefits of learning plans. But yeah, really kind of good good even within a module, you know, we can't actually start a quiz unless that lesson has actually been completed, and so on.
Yeah, so what we were trying to do here is really make it super obvious what the learner needs to go on with next, what they can currently work through, and what sort of requires prior work. And we can see here that these two assessments are grayed out and we're not actually able to drill into them. But there are quite a lot of controls about what learners are able to access in terms of content or in terms of previewing future or locked content. So in this case, because these assessments are locked, we've set it so learners can't access the overview for locked assessments. But if we had disabled that setting, they would be able to go into these and actually read about what this particular quiz will cover. And that also applies to modules. So for this provide first aid module, which would be the one that we haven't yet unlocked, we can see everything in here is locked, but we're actually able to see, I guess, what is in here that's been locked, where that's also something that we could disable. So we could make it so that provide first aid is visible as a module, but they can't see the actual learning and assessment items that are present within it. So
they couldn't like click on that to
yeah,
then expose
so
it as you.
they wouldn't be able to open it as I've done here. So there's quite a few options around controlling what content you want learners to be able to see at any one point in time and how far into the future you want them to be able to look, I suppose.
Do you want to just jump back into this welcome to commercial cookery again, Sam, and just scroll down, because I think it's important to note as well this really nice, satisfying little tick that you'll see, and your students will see as they are working through things. So obviously our first commercial cookery about this course, or about your course, as Sam had suggested, was made optional, which is why we've skipped it and there is no tick against it. But as you can see, you know, if we started working through, for example, in our second module, that lesson, and then on to that, you know, could be a self-marking quiz, a knowledge or a theory quiz that we might need to do, we're going to get those really nice progression ticks as well in here, which is really visual. And for me, I know I'm kind of ticking off all the different things that I can at this point in the course. All right, so I guess, Sam, anything else to mention when it comes to the learner experience or learning in general? I guess, what about things like, will I see things like my due dates, for example, or I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about this when it comes to authoring, but things around, you know, could I just continue if I, for example, have finished my knowledge quiz and I'm now, I've now unlocked my next module? Can I just keep going in my own sort of pace, or are there some other sort of rules and triggers?
Yeah, so we've also got scheduling rules which are able to be set up for all of the modules and the learning and assessment, as well as the prerequisite rules. So we could say with this particular module, they'd be able to fully complete it, but the next module, the first aid one, they might need to reach a certain date in the course before that then becomes unlocked. So in that case, there's two things that need to be met to sort of give them access: having completed the previous module and also having reached the date which was set for provide first aid module to actually begin. So the rules that you can set will probably become a little more obvious when we move on to the authoring side of things.
Which I think is a nice segue. Maybe we might move on to that now, if that sounds
yeah, absolutely.
good.
So here we have the actual authoring area for the learning plans feature, and for any existing Turbo clients, this is accessible through the courses tab, the e-learning section, and it's the first item here, learning plans, which will land you on this screen. So this is actually our published plan that we were just demonstrating within the portal, our commercial cookery blended. And you can see that we've actually got a pretty similar view to what learners are seeing, but a little bit more condensed. So it's a little bit easier for admins to sort of manipulate and view everything that's going in. So I think as part of this, what we'll do is actually create a new learning plan so we can go through what exactly you can include as part of a learning plan. So we're going to create a new plan called webinar demo, and we're going to base this off the same commercial, it was there, this one, same commercial cookery qual. And our plan overview we're not going to set anything for this, but this will appear to learners in their portal at the top of the plan. So now that we've created a brand new learning plan, the first thing we need to do is add a new module. So we're going to create another sort of demo onboarding module. So this is going to be welcome to the webinar. And then we could then add sort of additional overview text or images, videos. So when you see this particular editor, that means you can put all sorts of, I guess, rich content and media in there. But we're just going to put some basic text in here for now. And we can always change that later by going into the settings. So at the moment, there's 5 different what we call elements that you could add to a particular module. So I'll go through them in the order they're sort of presented here. But the first one, which we saw throughout our modules in the previous one, is these headers, which are really a pretty sort of light element, but pretty powerful for breaking up the content and sort of adding some instructional text to learners as they work through a particular module.
So that example you had, I think, Sam, was where you may have had learning and then, yeah, please complete all of the following learning prior to, going on to assessment, and then maybe even grouping all your assessment together. But it could even be that as part of this particular unit, there might be 3 concepts that you want the particular learner going through, and it could be then creating headers for each of those and then content blocks and lessons underneath as well.
So jumping back just briefly into this course again, we can see an example where I've used a learning header and an assessment header throughout the module. So that's kind of how it's going to appear for the learner, but pretty similar to how it will for the author as well. So content, this is sort of similar to heading, but it's again rich content like we were able to add in the overview. So things like videos, images, text. But for this one, we're just going to add some basic content, and we're just going to go business text.
And this is a really great way if you are wanting to introduce a unit or give the student a bit of an idea as to how they're going to be assessed on this particular unit. Yes, it could be text, but you might also create some really lovely video content, and it could be just embedding a video or an image in here. And just again personalizing this whole thing even more prior to then the student going on to actually commencing the learning and then going on to being assessed. So there's a lot that you can do with these little content blocks as well to break it up.
Yeah, that's right. And these content blocks, all of their content sort of appears in line with the other elements in the plan. So for authors, this will be a little bit more condensed, but for learners, we can see it's going to display sort of the full content as something that will always be present with those other elements in the plan. So that's really
content.
Yeah, that's content. So resources, these are any documents which you've uploaded to the aXcelerate resource library, such as PDFs. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this assessment task sheet as an example. So learning. Learning includes both external e-learning packages, such as SCORM, and aXcelerate's own native e-learning type lessons. So I'm just going to add one of the lessons that we had before, which I think was core concepts. So we're going to add that one. And then finally, assessments. So these are aXcelerate's online assessments. These include theory assessments such as self-marking or short answer quizzes, observation checklists, like practicals, assignments, and RPL assessments. So for this one, we're going to add, we might just add a basic quiz. There's a lot of quizzes in here. So yeah, we'll add this first aid online quiz. Yeah, so assessments are probably also a good candidate in general for utilizing the prerequisites feature that we've added within learning plans. So in this example, what we might do is take this lesson here and add it as a prerequisite for this first aid online quiz. So if we go into the settings for our quiz, we've got quite a few options we can set in terms of scheduling, but we'll just start with prerequisites for the time being. And this will actually show us possible other elements from the module that we could create as a prerequisite. So I'm just going to create this commercial cookery core concepts lesson as a prerequisite for our first aid quiz. So going back to the learning plan, we can see it's added in this nice little rule, which will tell us, yeah, that it requires completion of commercial cookery before they're able to access the first aid online quiz. So another thing that we could do in terms of setting up prerequisites is have a specific access date within the module. So we could say that they're going to get access to this particular quiz regardless of whether they've completed the prerequisites 3 days after it starts, and the due date is actually going to be 5 days after the module starts. So when we then go back to our overview, we can see that it's added in a couple of date rules for this particular online quiz as well. So that's quite handy in getting a really high level view of exactly how you've set up all of your learning content and what rules are involved or what rules need to be met for the learner to actually be able to attempt a particular learning item. So another important point worth mentioning with modules and learning and assessment are triggers. So if you go into the settings for a particular module, you can see we've got a couple of triggers here based around related units. So these can be configured to have their elements perform certain actions upon commencement and completion. So this can take the form of updating a unit's start date and status, for example, to in progress, when the learner first commences the learning related to that unit, or updating the unit to competent automatically once all the assessments have been completed. So for this one, we could set, we want to automatically commence the related units for any elements within this module. And so how that would kind of work is if we then went into our core concepts lesson and added in a related unit, which we're going to go manage diversity in the workplace. So we've got this linkage here now, and because we turn that trigger on, when a learner actually in their portal goes in and launches this core concepts lesson, it's actually going to automatically update the status, if the status is not yet started, of manage diversity in the workplace. Both the status and the start date will be updated to in progress, and whatever the start date was that the learner actually started working through this particular lesson. So there's quite a bit of automation that's possible in the background, but it's also quite flexible in terms of sort of how you want that to work, and if you want certain things to trigger those completions but other things to not, that's also possible as well. So certainly those triggers are going to be quite a powerful feature throughout this whole thing, and save trainers and administrators quite a bit of time in updating things like unit enrollments,
statuses and start dates and end dates. So Sam, just on that, so you just linked obviously this lesson, so you can link both lessons and assessments to units of competency, and you've kind of just chosen from a list of say server and commercial cookery a particular unit to link to, but if we've got clients that have previously created all these assessments, they've done all their mapping, they've kind of gone to that degree in our assessments tab. Can you talk a little bit through, I guess, what would then happen with the linkage to those units?
Yeah, so for our online assessments, if we have done the mapping in the assessment mapping area, they'll automatically receive this mapping when you add them to a learning plan based on sort of the qualification that you have mapped. So if we had mapped this one, which we hadn't, to this unit, it would do that for us. So it's not too difficult to do it yourself, but it is nice to have it automatically pick up those unit mappings as you bring it into the learning plan. So, but yeah, that is a demo, I guess, of also how you would do it manually.
And I think a really important thing to note there is that we're linking to, say, one unit as an example, but the way that this entire tool has been built is really in a way that, yeah, you may have one module that maps just to one unit, but you may also have one module or one cluster that, if we're kind of delivering in that classic clustered format, might map to 3 units of competency, which then, upon commencement of our lesson or upon completion of this entire module, we're getting updates not only to 1 unit, but potentially to 3.
Yeah, or we could do it in a lot more staggered approach and actually say, we're going to spread out a particular unit across 2 different modules. So we're going to have a learning module for this particular unit and a follow-up assessment module. So having a couple of modules cover one particular unit, but in a way that sort of reflects the sequence of how you deliver that training in real life. So another thing worth mentioning is reordering these elements. So the order which we place all of this content in is how it will appear for a learner in their portal. So we can do things like move this heading down to be the heading for our core concepts lesson. And we can also swap around sort of any elements within a module as well as modules themselves. So if we go ahead and create our second module, we'll be able to see we can actually drag this to become the first module in their plan. So yeah, and we don't try and automatically assume any order that you might want to present these particular elements in. So we do give you full control over this order, and how it's set up here, again, is exactly how it will come through for the learner in their portal. So 100% control, no guesswork needed for figuring out, I guess, what you're setting up here compared to how it's going to look for the learner. And that's one of the things we wanted to really focus on, was trying to make this view closely reflect how it will appear for learners, so there isn't as much need to be constantly previewing this enrollment with, I guess, a learning plan that you're currently developing.
Absolutely. And I think a really important thing to note as well is the fact that right now we're looking at, say, the second learning plan that we've created for our set 4 in commercial cookery. So I think, a really integral or really important thing to note is that you may deliver one qualification in all sorts of different ways. You may deal with corporate clients and be delivering within a workplace type, scenario, and they may expect the flow, or they want the order, or you'd like to deliver, the order in this sort of format. Whereas you may then have classroom-based students that are coming in and they might need to then undertake their lessons and their assessments in a slightly different way. So I guess the beauty of this learning plan is that once you've created one, you can go on to create as many as you like. And I think a really good example is this cert for in commercial cookery, because we've got a scenario where we might have a food and beverage stream, but we might then have a secondary stream which has different units attached to it and different learning, different assessments as well.
Yeah, and that was the example I was just bringing up here on this public safety cert, where we've actually got one stream which is for the full qualification, and then another which is just for RPL. So we would be able to create a specific learning plan for both of those scenarios, and actually create a class in aXcelerate which covers each of those scenarios, and have learners receive their own unique learning plan and go on their own unique learning journey.
Yeah, no, nice. So I think, Sam, we're probably at a point where it'd be exciting to maybe talk about the things that maybe have come through from feedback from some of our clients that have been testing this, or even internally, some of the things that we're working on right now that our clients can expect shortly, coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've got featured on this slide is actually the feedback mechanism, which we're building into learning plans. So after completing each module, learners will actually be given the chance to select a little sentiment rating, as well as provide some actual text feedback about their experience completing that particular module. So this is then, of course, going to be able to be reported on within the admin side of things. So you can see each learner within that class and sort of their particular sentiment and rating throughout the various modules that they've completed. So a really awesome tool for sort of monitoring learner engagement and reviewing who's really having or really enjoying the content, and also identifying any modules which are consistently sort of scoring low on the feedback side of things, so you can look to improve them.
Absolutely.
So another coming soon feature will be the inclusion of workshops within learning plans. So that's sort of the last main missing piece of the puzzle, having the ability to sort of have those workshops appear alongside all of your online content, and be able to create prerequisite rules that are based on the actual enrollment status of those workshops. So if they're booked and sort of finalized, then we could give them access to a particular assessment after that. So,
or even based on attendance, Sam, I think is probably a pretty integral thing potentially as well.
Yeah. the inclusion of LTI elements. So that will look like sort of adding learning and resources, but the ability for those resources or learning to be LTI driven. So we could add something like an electronic textbook resource straight into our learning plan for learners to launch via the portal, as well as a LTI powered learning course for them to sort of complete and then accelerate to know that they've completed and actually use that as a prerequisite for assessment as well. So that's something we're really excited about, LTI.
And the last one that we want to talk about?
So the support for rolling enrollments. So we want to have learners, give them the ability basically to start at a specific point in the plan. So we could have a learner start at prepare poultry dishes if that was the unit that you were currently teaching at that point in time. So that's really the rolling enrollment support, and just having, I guess, dynamically ordered learning plans to support the order in which you're teaching those units at any one point in time. And finally, the last feature we've got sort of under development is the terminology for these actual, what we've been referring to as modules throughout this webinar. We'll be letting you choose from a couple of common terms such as chapters or clusters to present to your learners instead. So we're definitely looking for feedback on that and what you would call, I guess, what we've presented here today in terms of these groups of learning elements. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for what's coming soon, but we'll also be doing a great deal of improvements based on feedback. So we've just gone over what we have planned, but really looking forward to having our clients start using this feature and giving us lots of great feedback that we can implement and make it even better. So there'll be quite a lot of improvements that we do in that respect as well.
Absolutely. So we might actually jump to some Q&A. We might even just have a quick look and see if there is any Q&A at this point.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. We're back. We're just seeing. So I think, there's a little bit here. So Sam, do you want to take it off? Take off the top? Go from the top, rather?
Yeah. So first question we had is the learning plan used as a training resource and not as assessments. So the learning plan is really there to sort of group everything like retraining resources and assessments into these sort of easily digestible modules which learners will actually work through, and they can see exactly what they need to do next. So it will really include training resources and assessments, and we would assume that a learning plan would cover sort of everything that they would need in terms of online content throughout their enrollment, and from the point of enrollment right up to completion of the course.
And the next one, can you manually turn on units in the learning plan as well?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of interaction between the units of competency and the actual learning plan content. So it's not so much turning on units, but if we had a scenario where a learner had received a credit transfer for a particular unit, upon enrolling that learner into that learning plan, it wouldn't enroll them into any content that was actually strictly related to just that unit. So if you had a module about work effectively as a cook, if I already had a credit transfer for that, at time of enrollment, I'm not going to get enrolled into any content that covers just that unit, because obviously that's quite redundant.
And I think, Sam, you may have touched on this and I'm forgetting that we touched on it, but with the ordering and I guess all of the different sort of triggers that you can set, whether it's date triggered or whether it's just prerequisite triggered, I guess the idea with this whole system is the fact that, you can have someone kind of progress through things in their own pace or at their own pace, but also have it very structured. So if you've got start and end dates that are very structured and set up, and even timetable within aXcelerate, everything can then be based off all of that as well. So we might actually just go into the view where everyone can see.
Yeah, so I was just getting to that next question, which was how do you add a background image? So what I've done here, and we have a few more settings than most of you guys will, but everyone will have this Learner Portal tab if they're on the new Learner Portal, and these two sub tabs, one of which is the logo and customization tab. So you can see we've added our normal logo and our night mode logo, as well as our two background images, and we can also set the opacity of that container and a theme that we'd like to use. So we're using this Fern theme at the moment, and there's a couple of fonts to choose from as well. So
and that's all located under your settings menu and then your system settings, and then
yeah,
into the Learner Portal settings as
that's
well.
right.
So yeah, by all means, definitely if you haven't done any config, or if you haven't got that looking how you want it looking with background images, yeah, that's a really great feature you can utilize.
Yeah, so Mason's question, how does this look on the Learner Portal homepage? So at the moment, the learning plan won't appear on the what we call the dashboard, which is really there at the moment to facilitate multiple class enrollments. But what we do have with learning plans is the ability to configure your portal so that what we're seeing here is effectively the new homepage for your learners. So, and that's really what we're intending with learning plans, is that you get them straight in there, they can immediately see what they need to work for. And for some clients, this view here will supersede what you've been currently using as the dashboard. So we'd really like this to be sort of the new dashboard for your learners going forward. And if they do have multiple enrollments, they can still swap between them in this way via this drop down. So the ability to actually skip the dashboard and make the learning plan the default sort of area they land on is possible through the settings, those same settings, but the general Learner Portal settings. So we can actually go enable learner dashboard no, and that means that my home as a learner is that overview or learning plan that we saw before, and we can also set what tab they'll land on by default. So whether we want them to see a list of the units, the course overview, or that actual learning plan. So those correspond with these tabs here. So we can see they can still access these units, but they won't actually be able to access the content that's related to those units. Everything will sort of be accessed through the learning plan, so that there's sort of just one, I guess, single source of truth in terms of what you need to work on, what you need to get through next.
But they'll still see that progression, you know, through the units as they go through and become competent, for example, if they drill into the unit tab.
Yeah, they can see exactly what sort of those unit statuses are.
And we're hoping that that will be really clear to learners. I think that we've definitely had feedback over the years where a student will enter into that sort of more dashboard view, even within our older portal as well, where they kind of have their assessments laid out, their learning laid out, and obviously, unlike learning plans, there's no sort of strict order, particularly for things like short courses. So we're hoping that literally by opening the course up and kind of, you know, being at the module that they need to start out and kind of then working through it will just be a lot more straightforward and just user-friendly as well for those students. So
yeah, so
next question.
Yep, from Sean's, what's the best way for a user to get back to the learning plan once they've completed a SCORM package? So this might be something that we look to do as an improvement, Sean. But yeah, I think that there is that limitation in there at the moment that if the SCORM package opens up in a sort of a separate
New
window,
tab or a new window.
the plan might not be totally aware that the learner has completed it, and they may need to refresh the page. So I think that's definitely something we could look at improving on, Sean. But thanks for that feedback. And also reordering modules within a published learning plan, because that could create a lot of chaos with existing enrollments. It is our intention that you're not able to reorder these once the plan is published and being used in a class. The reason being, if we were to move sort of this first module to be the third module, it would create quite a lot of havoc for that particular student who has completed this, because now they wouldn't have completed their first or second, but they would have completed their third. So there may be some areas that we could look at giving a bit more leeway there in the future. But at the moment, that is one that we've left in there as sort of a concrete rule, so that, yeah, the learner experience isn't adversely affected.
Do you want to maybe talk about as well the live edit, just on Sean's question, just about the fact that you've obviously got this publish mode and then more of a live edit mode, and sort of why we've created that and kind of what the key things are that you can edit in a published plan?
Yeah, so we do have this live edit feature, which does allow you to make pretty substantial changes to the content of your plan, and also, I guess, the order of the elements within your plan. So the one key thing that I would say you're not able to do is drag and rearrange these modules into a different order for the reasons that I sort of alluded to before. But within here, we can actually change the order of the elements, and as well, we could also drill in and change what this content actually is, or what this graphic is in this case, as well as sort of all of the rules, prerequisites, that sort of thing. And this will automatically push sort of live updates to the learner, automatically. So a lot more freedom. If you're familiar with online assessments, you'll know the limitations that exist there rather. There's a lot more freedom within learning plans to update things and sort of make changes to the content of the learning plan, even while they're already sort of in use by existing students.
I think that might be all the questions, at least all the ones that have come up in the chat that maybe haven't been answered by the other team members on the chat at the moment. But I guess ultimately, if you do have any questions, if you're not using Turbo at the moment, if you are using Turbo and you've got questions, please contact our customer success team, because our customer success managers would be happy to take you through and drill into a little bit more detail in here, and also kind of show you other key features that you may not be using at the moment. So things like, obviously we didn't cover off how you go about creating a lesson, how you go about creating something like a quiz, but would be a really, if you're not utilizing those at the moment, you might still be, delivering learning and assessment in a paper-based format, or even using an external learning management system. It could be worth exploring as well to then use with our learning plans. But otherwise, I think what we might do is sign off, let you all get back to your days. But thank you so much. And as we said, if you've got any questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. This also, I may have mentioned this at the beginning, but because we are live streaming, this will remain on our YouTube. So if you do want to watch it back or send the link to anyone else, it will be there in the future for you as well. But otherwise...
Just before we go, there were just a couple of questions that I'm dying to answer.
Okay, go for it.
Yes, the whole Learner Portal view is mobile responsive, so they can view all of the modules and their content on mobile. And on the topic of our YouTube, there are a number of learning plan shots, short hits of training already added. So I think somebody asked about, are there help resources in setting all of this up?
Yeah.
There absolutely are those shot videos and some really in-depth help guides in our help center as well and they contain everything you need to sort of get started to get to this point in terms of setup, and sort of go into the more nitty-gritty areas which we may have skipped over as part of this webinar. So definitely check our YouTube channel for those videos and our help center.
Check and subscribe.
Yeah.
All right. Any other last questions?
I think we're probably
pretty
good to go.
No worries. Well, as we said, if there's any other questions, please feel free to jump in and get in touch with us. But otherwise, have a great day. Thank you so much for joining the webinar. There will be plenty more where this came from. But otherwise, have a look at those shop videos and start trying out our learning plans feature. We're very excited to hear your feedback. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.